Alright folks, it is time that we start building things today. We're going to build mechanisms, and again by definition a mechanism is any system of parts that work together. For today we are going to build something, start building something called a simple gear train or a gear train with idler, and just look at how do gears mesh together and how do they transfer motion from one gear to the next. Alright, to begin with we're going to have to build a gear base. And this is going to be the platform that all of our mechanisms are built on. It's our starting point. When we are building over the next week or so, you are going to get a parts list so you know exactly what kind of pieces to get, and then you'll get a number of finished photos as well so you can see what it should look like when you're done. A lot of the large metal pieces are going to be found in the back of the classroom on the table, and all these little small pieces, the nuts and bolts, are going to be part of a toolbox that you have to work with. Okay. Alright. We use the Vex series, the nuts and the bolts. We call these star nuts. Sometimes they're called Kep nuts as well. These are the ones we're going to use. So these are what you're going to look for. The star side always goes towards the top of the nut. It's the first thing you thread on when you're using them. Okay. And then the plastic rivets, these black plastic pieces we use to hold the drive shafts, or they can be called axles, in place so they have less friction and they spin more freely. Okay, so review. Why do we use mechanisms? We're going to use these to change speed, torque, or direction from beginning to end, or we can change the type of movement, and we'll kind of get to those later. But when I say change the type of movement, at the beginning you could have a motion that's rotary and change it to like reciprocating or oscillating or linear motion, or you can go from any of these to any other point. Reciprocating means moving back and forth in a straight line. Rotary is in a circle, movement in a circle. Linear is movement one direction in a straight line. And oscillating is swinging back and forth. It's an arc, okay, that it goes back and forth. So those are the ways that we can change movement in a mechanism from beginning to end. And then we want to end today by building our first gear mechanism. This one's called a simple gear train, and it just has two gears that are meshed together. It has some pictures. We have a couple of these what are called collars. We have a handle. We have some plastic rivets that are used to put the axles through. And we're going to do all this in class so that we can get very adept, very good at building. Alright? So, let's look at something else. Here's what we're going to focus on today. We have a simple gear train and a gear train with idler, and they're slightly different. You're going to choose one of these to build. Okay. As we get started, these long metal pieces are either called axles or drive shafts, and to hold these in place you may notice that on one of these there's silver collars, and on the other build, the simple gear train, there's these black collars. There's two different kinds. The black ones are the newer style, and to use the black collars I simply push them on. There's a little rubber liner in the center so that it doesn't just slide off. And I use this to prevent the gears or wheels or whatever from falling off of the drive shaft. Okay. The other kind that you see over here, the metal ones, have a tiny little screw in the middle, and I would have to place these where I want on the axle and then use a screwdriver to tighten this tiny little set screw in the center. And in this case, all of our wrenches that are gold are the ones we use for these small screws. So this is called an Allen wrench, and I would just tighten this wherever I want that collar. I don't have to tighten it too much, and then it'll stay in place. Okay, and this way my gears or my wheels don't fall off. Either one is fine. You may use either one. As I've been using them, these are so much more convenient. See if you can find those in your toolboxes, and those are going to work really well for you. Okay. Speaking of toolboxes, this is the toolbox that all your groups are going to have to work with. You should notice that there's smaller axles in here. There's a bunch of the star Kep nuts in there. There's many different size bolts. And then here are those collars we're talking about. You see that there's mixed in there. There's the black rubber ones, and then there's the silver ones that need the Allen wrench. And then some other parts in here as well. Okay. All right. When you start building, how are you going to decide what you're going to build? We have one of these catalogs, And then for each build, there's going to be a parts guide to go along with it. Okay? And there's pictures and everything else. So we said the first thing we're going to look at is this thing called a simple gear train, and that might be what you want to build. Let me give you a little different view of that, a little more close-up view. Okay? So here would be a parts inventory for the first simple gear train. Notice that the gears in this one are the same size. Pictures on how to put it together. And then there's going to be another inventory for simple gear train B. You do not have to build both of these. Choose either A or B. And the difference is, look at this one has different size gears. Otherwise, all of these other parts are going to be the same. The parts inventory, if you don't know what a rivet or a collar is, look at the back of your worksheet, your stamp sheet. And there's a guide here too that says kind of the things you're going to find in your toolbox and what they're called. And then kind of the parts that are going to be on the back table as well. Okay? So, what do we have? Here's your choice on your first gear mechanism. You either have a simple gear train, which should have a handle in the back, and then as I turn one gear, notice that the teeth are meshed, both gears spin, they spin very easily, freely, there's not a lot of noise, there's not a lot of rubbing. Okay? That is a simple gear train. If you want something a little more complicated, because gears are kind of cool, you can build what's called a gear train with an idler. There's a handle again on the back. As I turn it, all gears turn. It's a smooth motion. Okay, they're meshed fairly well. And then when you get done choosing which one of these to build, let me know. I want to investigate your work, make sure that it's up to safety standards, that it's built very well and solidly, and I'll ask you a couple of conclusion questions. All right? So, your first build, choose between a simple gear train or a gear train with idler. Good luck.